By the end of this video, you're going to know the answer to 3 different questions. What are macros? What are the best macro ratios for you? And how do you calculate your macros to lose weight? So if you have any of those questions, make sure you keep watching the video. What's going on? It's Aaron from AMFIT Coaching, and today I'm covering everything that you need to know about macros. So if you don't know what macros are or what macro ratio you should be using, or you don't even know how to calculate your macros, I'm going to be covering that in this video. But first, before we actually get to macros, you need to know how many calories you should be eating to lose weight. So if you're in that boat, you don't really know how many calories you should be eating, make sure you check out my previous video. I'm gonna link it somewhere up here. There should be a link floating around up there. So click that link, watch the video, and that way you'll know a good calorie base of what you should be eating to lose weight. Then come back to this video to figure out how to set your macros. So before I cover what are macros, make sure you give the video a thumbs up. It helps more people see this video, which ultimately helps this channel grow. I appreciate all of the support you've given me so far. And if you like the video, you like this content, and you want to see more and see future updates for more videos, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below to keep seeing updates. So what are macros? Macros are essentially the building blocks and the backbone of your diet. They consist of proteins, carbs, and fats. And before we get into macro ratios and how to calculate your macros, let's get into the importance of each macro. It'll ultimately help you understand different macro ratios a lot easier. And when it comes to calculating your own macros, you'll know kind of what's happening behind the scenes. You'll know how to adjust on the fly if you need to. So the first macro we're going to look at is protein. This is the one that's going to help you maintain the majority of your muscle mass. So with all of these macros, protein, carbs, and fats, there's a set amount of calories associated with 1 gram of each. So when we get to calculating your macros, you're going to know how many calories are in all of your grams of protein. So in protein, in 1 gram of protein, there is 4 calories. So 1 gram is equal to 4 calories. Now remember this, make sure you write this down because we're going to need it later in this video. So protein also helps with a few other things. One thing that protein is good for is increasing your satiety, which is essentially increasing your feeling of fullness. So protein increases fullness. Another great thing about protein is that it has a high thermic effect of feeding, which means when you consume a large amount of protein, your body requires a lot more calories to break it down. So in the long run, you kind of burn more calories just eating more protein, which is awesome. So just eating more food, you get to burn more calories. One note on protein intake as well is that typically when you're losing weight, you do want a higher protein intake. So we are going to be prioritizing this when we're calculating our macros. I'll get into it more when we're in that section. So the next one we're going to be looking at is carbohydrates, or carbs for short. And just like protein, it also has 4 calories in 1 gram. So 1 gram of carbohydrates is equal to 4 calories. Write this down as well because we're going to need it later. Now carbs typically get a bad rap. A lot of people think that they're the cause of their weight gain. Simply, no. Carbs are good. You need carbs. Carbs are important for you get a lot of fibers from them. You get a lot of vitamins, nutrients from them that your body needs. They also help give your body the energy it needs. So if you have an active job and you work out, you need carbs. Your body needs carbs to function. So don't shy away from carbs. They are good for you. So the last macronutrient is fat. Now this one is a lot more calorically dense compared to the other macros, which simply means there's more calories per gram. So 1 gram of fat is equal to 9 calories. So a little more than double than protein and carbs. So this is one that can easily creep into a diet and make your calorie intake a lot higher than you think, because it may not look like a lot of calories, but it actually is when you know the caloric content. Now, you do need fats, however, they are important for a lot of hormonal processes, so don't shy away from fats. Your body does need fat. So restricting fats is something that you do not want to do unless you're under the supervision of a dietitian, but it's unlikely that you would be on an extremely low-fat diet. So next, I'm going to be giving you an overview of different macro recommendations and how you can pick one that may suit you the best. And then we're going to be getting into how to calculate your macros, and you can follow along with an example that I will provide. So I'm often asked, what are the best macros, or what is the best macro ratio? And simply, there isn't one. The best macro ratio is ultimately the one that works the best for you. And the best one's going to depend on a few things, like how active you are, how easily you get hungry, and just picking one out of thin air isn't always the best idea. So I'm going to give you 3 different macro approaches that will get you started and give you a better understanding of how to pick your macros. Now, the ones that I give you, they're not set in stone, and you can easily customize them depending on how you feel. So the first one is going to be a balanced approach. This is more of an even mixture of protein, fats, and carbs. So if you're newer to counting macros, then this may be the better option, so you can kind of get used to how things are. Then you can tweak it depending on how things feel. A balanced approach, it's going to have 30% protein, then it's going to have 35% carbs, and 35% fat, which simply means 30% of your calories are coming from protein, 35% of your calories are coming from carbs and fats, respectively. So this is ideal if you're just starting out. I will write these down below, so if you don't want to write these down, you can just copy and paste them from the description. So this one's great if you're just starting out, and then you can kind of customize it depending on how you feel. So right here, we have 35, 35. We're going to keep the protein the same. Now, let's say if you try this out and you feel that you're kind of low energy and your workouts aren't that great compared to what they used to, then you could easily increase the carbohydrates and decrease the fats a little bit. So you could go up to 45% carbs and then go down to 25% fats, and then try it out and then see how you feel. And that's kind of how you could arrive at the best macro ratio for you. So that's balanced. That's a balanced approach, even mixture of everything. So next, I'm going to show you a high carb, low fat approach and a low carb, high fat approach. Next, we're going to look at a high carbohydrate, low fat macro ratio. Now this, we're going to have 30% of our calories coming from protein. We're going to have 45% of our calories coming from carbohydrates and 25% coming from fats. This is carbs and this is fats. So with this one, this would be more suitable for someone who has a slightly higher activity level. For myself, for example, this is typically how my diet is set up. Usually the carbs are closer to 50 or 55%. So if you're someone who works a physical job and you exercise frequently, you're going to need a slightly higher carbohydrate intake just because of your energy demand. So try this one out if you have a higher activity level. Also, if you're someone that gets hungry easily, a low fat diet like this one, high carb diet, is typically a little better because your volume of food is going to be higher, meaning you're going to feel a little more full. Whereas if you were to eat, in our next example, a high fat, low carb diet, the meals may be a little less satiating for you, meaning you're going to be a little more hungry after eating your meals. So if you find you get hungry often, try out a high carb, low fat macro ratio and then see how that feels for you. So next, we're going into a high fat, low carb macro ratio. So now we're doing the high fat, low carb macro ratio. For this, we have 30% protein, just like the other ones. Now on this one, a little bit different. We're going to have 45% of our calories coming from fats, and then 25% of our calories coming from carbohydrates. So this diet would be more suitable for someone who's a little more sedentary and isn't as active. For this, you may be able to tolerate a higher fat intake. There are some people out there as well who don't tolerate carbs very well, so being on a macro split like this would be a little easier and a little more beneficial for them. Also, if you're someone that can manage their hungry, or you don't get hungry that often no matter what you eat, then this would be one of the better diets to eat. Most of your meals will be a little smaller because the fat intake is higher. So those were the 3 main macro ratios. You can try them out, see which one works best. I recommend starting with the balanced approach first if you're completely new. That way you can kind of tweak it based off how you feel. And it can easily morph into the high fat or high carb macro ratio. So you probably noticed as well, all of these macro ratios had 30% protein. Now why 30%? When you're losing weight, you do need a higher protein intake, so that way you can retain more muscle mass while you're losing weight. So our protein demands are higher. Typically, when I'm calculating some macros, I don't always do a percentage. I usually do it in terms of grams per pound. So I'm not going to get into it this video. It's a lot more info that's not needed in this video. So typically, if you do 30% or as low as you can, maybe 25%, that would be a good range to get your protein in. That way you know you're getting enough protein to support your weight loss and to maintain your muscle mass while you're losing weight. This is the part you've most likely been waiting for, and that is how to calculate your calories. So from our previous examples, we're going to be going with a balanced approach for this example. So we have 30% protein, 35% carbs, and 35% fats. Now this individual, for example, needs 2,000 calories in order to lose weight. So let's calculate what this person's macros should be while eating 2,000 calories. So first step, we're going to calculate our protein intake using 30% protein. So for protein, we're going to use a P here. We have 30% of our 2,000 calories is going to be protein. So first step is multiplying 2,000 by 30%. So we have 2,000 times 0.3, which is equal to 600. Now, we know that in 1 gram of protein, we have 4 calories, which means in this 600 calories, all we have to do is divide it by 4, and then we're going to get the number of grams of protein required. So we divide this by 4, and then we get how much grams of protein we need for this individual. And that number is 150 grams. So on a balanced diet, this person eating 2,000 calories needs 150 grams of protein. So now let's get into carbohydrates. How many grams of carbohydrates do they need on this diet? So for this person, we have 35% of our calories are coming from carbohydrates. So similar to the last example, we're going to have, put a line here, 2,000 times 0.35. And then that's going to give us the number of calories coming from carbohydrates. So this gives us 700 calories. And then in 1 gram of carbs, remember if you wrote it down, there is 4 calories. So we divided by 4 to figure out the grams of carbs required. 700 over 4 is equal to 175 grams. So far we have 150 grams of protein, 170 grams of carbs. So All that we need to do now is calculate our fats. And we have 35% of our calories coming from fats. So we're going to follow the same method to get our grams required. For our fats, same thing. We're going to multiply 2,000. It's also 35% by 0.35, which is going to give us the same number. 700 calories are coming from fats. Now remember, in 1 gram of fat, there's 9 calories. It's a lot more dense than the other macros where we just have 4 calories in 1 gram. So now in this one for fats, we're going to divide it by 9. We have 700 over 9. And then this gives us roughly 78. It's roughly 77.7. We're just going to round up. So 78 grams here. So now we figured out for this person who is eating 2,000 calories, they're following a balanced approach. They need 150 grams of protein, 175 grams of carbs, and 78 grams of fats. So those are the macros for this person. And then that's all you do to calculate your macros. First step, pick a macro ratio that may be best. So go in the description, pick one that kind of suits your lifestyle, either balanced if you like. You can always tweak this depending on how it feels. And then you're going to input your calories. So your calories needed to lose weight. So the calories that put you in a deficit. Then once you have that macro ratio, you just need to multiply that percentage by the total calories. Then that gives us the number of calories coming from that macronutrient. So for our protein example, it's 600 calories of our daily calories are coming from protein. Then we just need to divide it by the number of calories that are in 1 gram of the macro. So in this case for protein, 1 gram of protein is 4 calories. So we divide this by 4, then we get our grams. And just remember, fats is 9. So when you're doing fats, you have to divide the calories by 9. If you divide it by 4, you're going to get a number that's a lot bigger than needed, and your calories are going to be a little out of whack. So that was my overview of how you calculate your macros. So let me know in the comments down below what macro ratio you're going to try, or which macros you use currently and what works best for you. And as always, make sure you give the video a thumbs up and click that subscribe button down below to keep seeing future content. See you next time.